The vast expanse of space was both familiar and endlessly monotonous to the 5 alien girls. They hailed from corners of the galaxy so distant that even their combined knowledge of the stars barely brushed the surface of the universe's infinite mysteries. Their worlds, though rich in technology, culture, and history, had begun to feel sterile, cold, and devoid of the spark they craved. The gleaming cities of their home planets, the hum of their advanced technology, the strictly regulated lives, they had it all. And yet, it wasn't enough. They needed something more, something raw, unpredictable. That something more was Earth. From the bridge of their sleek, shimmering spacecraft, a thing of alien beauty that cut through the vacuum of space with an ethereal glow, they looked upon their destination with unbridled excitement. For months, they'd exchanged stories, rumors, and ancient legends about Earth. Most of the galaxy's more advanced species had dismissed it as primitive and inconsequential, but there was an allure to its simplicity, its rich natural beauty, and most intriguing of all, its inhabitants, humans. Is it everything we imagined? Lyra's voice broke the silence. She stood at the helm, her crystalline body reflecting the blue and green of Earth's surface below. Her long limbs, glittering with facets that caught the ambient light of their ship, moved with the grace of a creature in perfect harmony with both technology and nature. Her eyes, composed of radiant prisms, reflected the planet back at the group. "It's vibrant," Scylla replied, her voice tinged with the electric hum of curiosity. Her smooth, blue skin shimmered faintly under the soft lights of the ship. She was more than eager to touch the emotions of this world, to drink in its passions and moods, like a sponge soaking in water after years in a desert. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Kyvra said, her tone cool and measured. Her sharp, silver eyes an echo of the precision and logic she prided herself on narrowed as she studied the readings on the ship's console. "We came here for a vacation, not to disrupt anything." Thalra let out a low, amused grunt. "Speak for yourself. If there's something worth shaking up down there," I'm all in her muscular frame, barely contained within the light armor she always wore, was a testament to her warrior nature. Thalra's species valued strength above all else, but even she had grown weary of endless battles and honor duels. Earth, with its supposed tranquility, was a break she was more than ready for. Nema, the most quiet of the group, simply watched as the planet grew larger in the ship's viewport. Her deep violet eyes, set in her delicate, almost translucent form, gleamed with quiet anticipation. She was from a world of water and soft whispers, where emotions were ripples in a vast ocean. Earth's emotions would be more like waves crashing against rocks, and she was ready to feel their power. They descended through Earth's atmosphere like a comet, hidden behind a cloaking field that made them invisible to human eyes. The ship trembled softly as it entered the planet's gravitational pull, and the view outside shifted from the infinite darkness of space to the rich blue of Earth's skies. Clouds swirled beneath them, and soon they were soaring over a great expanse of ocean, its waves glimmering like liquid sapphire. "We'll blend in," Leora said, turning to the others. "Humans won't suspect a thing. Our bio-disguises are flawless." One by one, the alien girls activated their cloaking devices. Their otherworldly appearances shimmered and morphed, their crystalline, blue, muscular, and ethereal forms now replaced with human shapes and skin tones. They looked ordinary, though anyone who gazed too long might sense an otherworldly elegance that set them apart. "Where do we land?" Zyla asked, her excitement bubbling over. "Let's start somewhere populated," Leora said, adjusting their course. "We want to experience what this world has to offer." First steps in a strange world. Their ship landed deep in a forest, far from prying eyes. The cloaking field extended over it, making it appear as nothing more than a natural clearing, indistinguishable from the landscape around it. They stepped out into the crisp, cool air of the Earth night, the stars twinkling overhead, far more dimly than they were used to on their planets. "So, this is it," Nema whispered, her breath catching as she took in the smells of the forest, the soft rustling of leaves, the call of distant night creatures. She knelt and touched the ground, feeling the cool soil between her fingers. "It's alive in ways I didn't expect." Zyla twirled around, her arms outstretched. "I can feel the emotions of this place. Even nature here has its own pulse. It's raw and untamed, but so warm. I've never felt anything like this." Thalra crossed her arms, a rare smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Let's find out what this planet can offer. I want to see how strong these humans really are." They made their way to a nearby town, the lights twinkling in the distance like a galaxy fallen to Earth. As they approached, the noises of human life grew louder: laughter, conversations, music. The girls entered the town and found themselves in the midst of a festival, humans celebrating under colorful banners strung between trees. Music echoed through the streets, and the warm glow of lanterns bathed everything in a soft, golden light. People danced, laughed, and embraced without a care in the world. The alien girls, disguised as humans, fit right in. "Look at them," Leora whispered, her voice filled with awe. "So full of life, emotion, they wear their hearts on their sleeves." Zyla's empathic senses were overwhelmed with the emotions flowing around her: joy, excitement, love, and even small undercurrents of sadness and longing. "They're so open," she murmured. "They feel everything so deeply." Thalra snorted. "They don't seem like much of a threat, but maybe that's the point. They're not warriors like us." "They don't need to be," Nima said quietly. "They're connected in a different way." The night deepened, and as they mingled with the humans, the girls began to experience Earth in ways they hadn't expected. The simple pleasures of human life were intoxicating. Leora found herself drawn to the intellectual conversations of a group of scientists, their curiosity about the universe mirroring her own. Silas slipped into a circle of artists, sharing stories of love and loss, reveling in the depth of their emotions. Thalra, ever the warrior, found herself drawn to a human soldier, exchanging tales of battle and strength, but finding in him a vulnerability that intrigued her. And Nima, shy and delicate, found a quiet spot by the river that ran through the town, where a young human man sat alone, sketching. He didn't notice her approach, too absorbed in his art, but when he did, he smiled. It was a simple gesture, but it held a warmth that Nima had never felt before. "Do you mind if I sit here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," he replied, his smile never fading. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" Nima nodded, feeling her heart stir in a way she hadn't expected. This was what she had come here for, to feel something new, something different, and in that moment she realized that Earth had more to offer than just sights and sounds. It was full of connections, of raw, unfiltered emotions that were so unlike anything in her cold, logical world. As dawn approached, the girls reconvened at the edge of the town, their hearts and minds buzzing with the new experiences they had gathered. "I didn't expect it to be like this," Leora admitted, her crystalline eyes shimmering behind her human guise. "These humans, they're not what I thought, they're more complex." "More emotional," Zyla added, a dreamy look in her eyes. "They feel everything so deeply. It's beautiful." "We're here to enjoy ourselves," remember Thalra said, though even her tough demeanor had softened. "But there's something different about them. I can't quite place it." Nima said nothing, her thoughts still on the quiet artist by the river. She had felt something stir inside her, a connection, fleeting but real, and it was only the beginning. As they returned to their ship to rest, the alien girls realized that Earth was far more than just a vacation spot. It was a place that could change them in ways they hadn't expected. And though their journey had just begun, the seeds of something deeper, something far more meaningful, had already been planted. The following days on Earth unfolded like a delicate dream, each moment richer and more intoxicating than the last. For the 5 alien girls, their initial curiosity about the planet had blossomed into something far more complex. They had come seeking adventure, a break from their sterile, highly regulated lives, but now they found themselves drawn into the deep, mysterious web of human emotions. The planet, with all its unpredictability and raw vitality, had begun to weave itself into their very beings. Leora stood on a balcony overlooking the cityscape, the night air cool against her skin. In her human disguise, she looked unassuming, a young woman with dark, flowing hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. But beneath the surface, she was a creature of light and energy, her crystalline form always shimmering just beneath the veneer of her disguise. The bustling city below, with its countless glowing lights, reminded her of the distant stars in her home galaxy. Beside her stood Dr. Nathan Cole, a human scientist she had met during one of her excursions into the human world. His fascination with the cosmos had drawn her to him, and she had found herself returning to his side time and time again. At first, it had been a simple curiosity after all. He was a man who spent his life looking up at the stars, just as she had spent hers traveling among them. But now, there was something deeper in the way he spoke to her, something that resonated in the hollow places she hadn't known were empty. They say the stars hold all the answers, Nathan mused, his voice soft as they both gazed skyward. But the more I study them, the more questions I seem to have. Leora smiled, a small, secretive curve of her lips. The universe is vast. Perhaps it's not meant to give us answers. Perhaps it's meant to make us wonder. Nathan turned to her, his eyes gleaming in the low light. You always speak like someone who knows more than she's letting on. Leora's heart stilled, the crystalline core of her body pulsing faintly under her human skin. She had told him nothing of her true origins. How could she? The chasm between their worlds was too vast, too impossible to explain. And yet here she was, drawn to this human man in a way that both exhilarated and terrified her. Maybe I do, she said, her voice light though her eyes reflected the weight of the truth she carried. Or maybe I've just spent too much time thinking about the stars. Nathan chuckled, unaware of the complexity behind her words. Well, if that's the case, I hope you'll keep thinking. There's something about you, Leora. Something different. She felt her heart stir again, an unfamiliar sensation for someone from a world where emotions were often suppressed in favor of intellect and reason. Nathan's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment she let herself imagine what it would be like to truly connect with him, to let the walls between them fall away. But that was a fantasy, wasn't it? Scylla, meanwhile, was losing herself in the riotous vibrancy of human emotions. She had always been the one to embrace feelings, to dive headfirst into whatever the universe had to offer, and Earth was proving to be more than she could have ever imagined. She had found herself drawn to Jesse, a musician whose soul seemed to hum with the same frequency as hers. His music was unlike anything she had ever heard on her home planet, raw, full of passion, and unashamed of its intensity. He played guitar in a small, dimly lit club in the heart of the city, and Scylla had been returning to that club every night since the first time she heard him perform. That night she sat close to the stage, her blue skin disguised as a pale, human form, her empathic senses tuned to the emotions flowing from the crowd. But mostly she was tuned to him. His music was like a direct line into his heart, every note carrying his thoughts, his dreams, his fears. And as he played, she let herself sink into it, feeling every pulse of emotion like it was her own. When Jesse's set was over, he found her waiting for him backstage. He was sweaty, his long hair clinging to his forehead, but his smile was bright and easy. "You're back," he said, wiping his face with a towel. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." Scylla grinned, her eyes sparkling in a way that made her seem otherworldly, even under her disguise. "I couldn't stay away. Your music. It's powerful." Jesse laughed, slinging his guitar over his shoulder. "I don't know about powerful, but I'm glad you like it. You've got this, I don't know, this way of looking at me like you can see something in the music that no one else can." Her grin softened into something more intimate, her heart opening in ways she hadn't expected. "Maybe I can," she whispered, stepping closer to him. "Music is emotion, and you put everything you are into it. It's beautiful." Jesse's smile faltered, and for a moment the easy confidence he usually carried fell away. He looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment something shifted between them. There was a pull, magnetic and undeniable. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "There's something about you, too," he murmured. "Something I can't quite figure out." Scylla's breath caught in her throat, and for the first time she felt a wave of fear. Not of him, but of what she was feeling. Of how quickly she had let herself fall for this human, this fragile emotional being. But she couldn't stop it. She didn't want to stop it. Before she could think it through, she leaned in and kissed him. His lips were warm and soft, and as they connected, she felt his emotions flood through her surprise, desire, hope. It was intoxicating, and she lost herself in the rush of it all. In that moment, she didn't care about the consequences. She didn't care about the distance between their worlds. All that mattered was the heat between them, the way their hearts seemed to beat in sync. Thalra, on the other hand, was finding her own form of connection, though it was less about emotions and more about understanding. She had always been the warrior, the strongest, the one who could outfight anyone on her home planet. But here on Earth, her strength was not what defined her. It was her curiosity. She had met Adam, a soldier, during a training session at a local gym. It wasn't exactly the kind of place she had expected to spend her time on Earth, but when she saw him working out, something about his determination and focus intrigued her. Adam was different from the men she had known on her planet. He didn't wear his strength like a badge of honor. Instead, it was quiet, disciplined, and layered with vulnerability, a strange combination for someone like her, who had always associated strength with power. They had sparred together, and though Thalra held back after all, she could have easily overpowered him. She was impressed by his skill and his refusal to back down, even when it was clear she had the upper hand. "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" Adam had asked, wiping sweat from his brow after their first sparring session. Thalra smirked. "Let's just say I've had a lot of practice." Adam chuckled, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or maybe respect. "You're not like anyone I've ever met. You fight like a soldier, but there's something else about you. Something different." Thalra shrugged, though inside she felt a strange warmth at his words. Maybe I am different. They continued to meet at the gym, and over time their conversations grew deeper, moving beyond fighting techniques and training regimens. Thalra found herself drawn to Adam's quiet strength, the way he carried the weight of his past without letting it define him. He told her stories of his time in the military, the battles he had fought, and the losses he had suffered. Thalra, in turn, shared some of her own experiences, though she kept the details vague. After all, it wasn't as if she could explain the wars of her home planet to a human. One night, after an intense sparring session, they sat together on a bench outside the gym, the cool night air washing over them. Adam was quiet, his gaze distant as he stared up at the stars. "You ever wonder what else is out there?" he asked suddenly. Thalra glanced at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" Adam shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I think there's got to be more than just this. More than just the wars we fight, the things we do to survive. Maybe there's something bigger out there, something we can't even imagine." Thalra's chest tightened. If only he knew. "Maybe there is," she said softly. Adam turned to her, his expression serious. "You ever feel like you're not where you're supposed to be? Like you're different?" Thalra swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Yeah," she whispered. "I feel that way all the time." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of their unspoken words hanging between them. And then, slowly, Adam reached out and took her hand. His touch was warm, grounding, and Thalra felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She had spent her life fighting, always proving her strength, always keeping her emotions in check. But here, with Adam, she didn't have to be strong. She could just be. Nima, delicate and shy, had found her own quiet corner of earth in the arms of Leo, the artist she had met by the river. They had fallen into a comfortable routine every evening. They would meet at the same spot, and Leo would sketch while Nima watched in silence, content to simply be near him. Leo was gentle, his movements careful and precise as he captured the world around him on paper. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, filled with a quiet wisdom that Nima found comforting. One evening, as they sat together by the river, Leo handed Nima one of his sketches. It was of her, sitting by the water, her face serene and peaceful. She stared at it, her heart swelling with emotion. "You captured me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the flowing water. Leo smiled softly. "I just drew what I saw." Nima looked up at him, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "No one's ever seen me like that before." Leo's smile faltered, and for a moment he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Maybe no one's ever taken the time to look. Nima's heart fluttered, and in that moment she knew that Earth had given her something she had never expected: someone who truly saw her, not just as an alien or a visitor, but as herself. As the alien girls continued to explore Earth and their relationships with the humans they had met, they found themselves more deeply entwined with this world than they had ever anticipated. What had started as a vacation, a brief escape from their highly advanced but emotionally distant lives, was becoming something far more significant. They were falling in love. But as their connections deepened, so did the weight of the secrets they carried. Each of them knew that their time on Earth was limited, and that the truth of their origins could complicate everything. And yet, as they stood beneath the stars, each of them in the arms of someone who made them feel alive in ways they had never imagined, they couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was where they were meant to be. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting its soft golden glow on the quiet earth beneath. For days, the alien girls had basked in the warmth of the human connections they were forming, their hearts tangled with feelings they had never imagined possible. There was something about the simplicity and rawness of human emotion that left them intoxicated, captivated by the fragility and beauty of it all. But that morning, as the early light broke through the windows of their temporary human lives, the alien girls began to sense a strange change. It was subtle at first, a lingering fatigue that couldn't be shaken, an unusual warmth radiating from deep within their bodies. At first they thought it was nothing more than exhaustion from the whirlwind of earthly experiences they'd thrown themselves into. But as the hours passed, the signs became harder to ignore. Lyra woke up in a haze, her body heavy, her mind fogged with unfamiliar sensations. She rolled over in bed, her eyes focusing slowly on the unfamiliar ceiling of the small apartment she had rented in the city. For a moment she considered staying in bed, a luxury she rarely allowed herself back on her home planet, but something inside her urged her to move. A sharp, sudden pang twisted in her stomach, and Lyra gasped, clutching her abdomen. Her mind raced, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't just fatigue. This wasn't something she could brush off as a consequence of her emotional entanglement with Nathan or the newness of the Earth environment. No, this felt deeper, more primal. She stood on shaky legs, making her way to the small, circular device she had brought from her homeworld. It was her personal medical scanner, something her species rarely needed but kept for emergencies. She activated it with a flick of her wrist, the glowing orb hovering above her as it scanned her body. Her breath caught in her throat as the device beeped softly and displayed the results. "Impossible," she whispered, her crystalline eyes widening. She read the data again, her mind struggling to comprehend what it was telling her. It couldn't be true. It wasn't possible, not biologically, not genetically, not scientifically. She was pregnant. Zyla had been sitting in the park, basking in the emotions of the humans around her, when she felt the first wave of dizziness hit. She blinked, her empathic senses overwhelmed by the strange cocktail of sensations coursing through her. It wasn't coming from the humans around her, it was coming from within. She stood up too quickly, the world spinning around her. Clutching her head, she stumbled toward the nearest bench, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. This was wrong. She wasn't supposed to feel this way. Her body, designed to withstand the emotional onslaughts of entire civilizations, had never faltered like this before. Zyla pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady her racing heart. She closed her eyes and reached inward, attempting to sense what was happening inside her own body. What she found shocked her to her core. A new life. A tiny, flickering spark of consciousness that wasn't her own. She opened her eyes, her entire world shifting beneath her feet. "I can't be," she whispered, her hand trembling as it rested on her stomach. I didn't think this was possible." Her mind raced back to Jesse, to the nights they had spent together, wrapped in each other's arms, lost in the raw emotion of their connection. She had thought it was just a fleeting romance, something beautiful but temporary. But this was something else entirely. In a gym on the other side of town, Thalra was in the middle of her usual morning workout, pushing her body to its limits as she always did. Sweat glistened on her brow as she completed a grueling set of pull-ups, her muscles burning with exertion. But even as she powered through the familiar motions, there was a strange heaviness in her limbs, a nagging discomfort in her core that she couldn't shake. Thalra dropped down from the pull-up bar, rolling her shoulders to release the tension, but the discomfort only grew worse. It was a pressure, deep inside her, something that no amount of training could explain away. She gritted her teeth and headed for the locker room, where she could be alone. Once inside, Thalra leaned against the cool tile wall, her breathing labored. She placed a hand on her stomach, instinctively trying to locate the source of the pain. Her warrior instincts told her something was wrong, very wrong. She activated her personal medical device, hidden in her locker, and ran a diagnostic scan. The results appeared before her eyes, and for the first time in her life, Thalra felt true fear. The scan confirmed it. She, the strongest warrior of her species, was pregnant. And not just with any child, this was a human hybrid. Her mind reeled. How could this happen? Her species was known for their genetic perfection, their isolation from other life forms. The idea that a human could impregnate her was not only biologically improbable, but also a challenge to everything her society believed. She clenched her fists, her heart racing. She had to tell the others. This was more than just a personal issue, this had galactic consequences. At the riverbank, where she had spent so many peaceful evenings, Nima sat in silence, her violet eyes fixed on the gentle flow of the water. But today, her usual tranquility was gone, replaced by a growing unease in her body. She had felt it for days now, a slow, steady shift inside her, like a tide turning against the current. Leo had noticed it too. He had asked her, gently, if she was feeling all right. But how could she explain it to him? How could she tell him that her body, so delicate and alien, was betraying her in ways she didn't understand? She had retreated to the river alone that morning, hoping the water would soothe her, but it had only intensified the strange sensations. She placed a hand on her stomach, her fingers trembling as she felt the faint stirrings of something new, something alive. Nima closed her eyes, reaching deep inside her being, searching for answers. And there, beneath the surface of her consciousness, she felt it, a heartbeat. Not hers. Not human. But not fully alien either. Tears welled in her eyes as the realization hit her. She was carrying Leo's child. A child that shouldn't even be possible. By the time Kyvra felt the strange shifts in her body, the others had already begun to piece together what was happening. Unlike the others, Kyvra was more attuned to her body's rhythms. Her species had developed such finely tuned control over their physiology that any deviation was immediately noticeable. She had felt the changes almost as soon as they began, and she had run a diagnostic on herself before the thought even crossed her mind to do so. The results were irrefutable. She too was pregnant, and she too carried a human-alien hybrid. Kyvra stood in front of the full-length mirror in the apartment she had rented, her expression impassive as she stared at her reflection. She touched her stomach, though there was no visible sign of the life growing inside her yet. Her logical mind whirred, trying to process the data. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her species was biologically incompatible with humans, at least. That's what all of the galactic research had indicated. And yet here she was, carrying the undeniable proof that such a union was possible. She took a deep breath and activated her communicator. It was time to gather the others. The 5 alien girls met in the same forest clearing where their ship was hidden, their faces etched with shock and uncertainty. The air was thick with tension as they stood in a circle, each one grappling with the reality of what was happening to them. "This isn't possible," Leora said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Our species aren't compatible with humans. This shouldn't be happening." "Tell that to my body," Zyla muttered, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I felt it, there's life inside me. A child. A hybrid." Thalra's face was a mask of barely contained fury, her fists clenched at her sides. "This complicates everything. If our people find out about this, they'll see it as a threat." Kyvra finished, her voice as calm and measured as ever. "Our societies are not ready for this. We're not ready for this." Nima, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "Maybe it's not a threat. Maybe. This is something new, something that could change everything." The others turned to look at her, and for a moment there was silence. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. "They won't see it that way," Thalra said, shaking her head. "Our societies are built on rules, on maintaining the purity of our species. If they find out we've had children with humans," Leora finished, her voice heavy with the gravity of the situation. The word hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Children. Half human, half alien children. "What do we do?" Zyla asked, her usually carefree demeanor replaced with fear and uncertainty. "We can't stay here forever. We'll have to go back. And when we do, they'll know," Kyvra said quietly. "And they won't just be curious, they'll be afraid. Afraid of what these children mean for the future of the galaxy." Leora ran a hand through her hair, her mind racing. "This isn't just about us anymore. This is about them, our children. They could be the key to something bigger than we ever imagined. But how do we protect them? How do we keep them safe?" The group fell into a heavy silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The future was no longer the carefree adventure they had set out for. It was something much more complicated, something with far-reaching consequences that they couldn't yet fully comprehend. Finally, Thalra broke the silence. "We need to tell the humans, the ones we connected with. They deserve to know." The others nodded, though the idea of revealing the truth to the men they had grown close to was daunting. How would they react? Would they see this as a miracle or as a curse? "I'll tell Nathan tonight," Leora said, her voice steady, though her heart raced at the thought. "He deserves to know the truth." "I'll tell Jesse," Zyla added, though her usual bravado was tempered by fear. "I can't hide this from him." Thalra, Nima, and Kaivra all nodded, their resolve firm, despite the uncertainty that loomed over them. They had come to Earth for a vacation, a break from the sterile confines of their technologically advanced worlds, but now they were facing something far greater, a future that was as uncertain as it was full of potential. And as they stood together in the quiet forest, each of them carrying the weight of the new lives growing inside them, they knew one thing for certain: their time on Earth had changed everything. The stars stretched out in endless, glittering silence as the ship cut through the vacuum of space, leaving Earth behind like a distant, fading memory. The alien girls sat in the quiet hum of their ship's command chamber, the weight of their decision pressing down on them like the vastness of space itself. Their brief, carefree vacation had unraveled into something much more profound, something irreversible. They had left Earth, not just with memories but with life growing inside them, half human, half alien children. And now they were returning home, each to face their own world's inevitable reaction. The ship, sleek and organic in its design, was a marvel of alien technology, but none of its advanced systems could prepare them for the storms awaiting them on their respective home planets. The quiet tension in the air was palpable, the conversations that should have been happening hanging unspoken between them. Each woman sat with her own thoughts, lost in the enormity of what lay ahead. Leora broke the silence first, her voice soft but filled with determination. "We knew this was coming. We've prepared for it as much as we can." "But there's no real way to prepare for this," Thalra replied, her arms crossed over her chest. Her usual warrior confidence was tinged with uncertainty. "Not for something like this." Zyla leaned back in her seat, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the surface of the console. "I wonder what Jesse would say if he could see us now." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. He'd probably laugh and call this the weirdest road trip ever. Nima, always the quiet one, spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I miss Leo already. I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye properly." Her violet eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "How can I explain all of this to my people when I don't fully understand it myself?" Kaivra, seated at the helm, kept her gaze fixed on the star-filled view ahead. "We've done what we had to. Our worlds need to know the truth, and we need to be there to face the consequences. The galaxy is not prepared for hybrids, but that doesn't mean we should hide them." Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Each of the girls carried within them the beginnings of a new chapter for the galaxy, whether their people were ready for it or not. Leora's homecoming, the world of crystalline knowledge. Leora's home planet, Vireth, was a gleaming world of crystalline cities, floating towers and luminous energy fields that stretched across the landscape like a web of light. The Virethi prided themselves on their intellect, on their mastery of science and logic. Emotion was considered an anomaly, a distraction from the pursuit of knowledge. Leora, with her sharp mind and dedication to scientific discovery, had always fit perfectly into this world. But now, returning home carrying a child born of emotion, of passion, she felt like an outsider in her own land. The moment she stepped off the ship, her crystalline body shimmering in the bright light of Vireth's twin suns, she was met by the High Council, a group of elder Virethi whose very presence commanded respect. Their eyes, facets of gleaming crystal like her own, reflected the gravity of the situation. Leora, one of the elders, spoke, his voice resonating with the calm, measured tone of someone who had lived for centuries. "You have returned from your expedition, but we sense that you are not the same as when you left." Leora took a deep breath, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach. "No, I'm not. I have come back with a discovery of a different kind, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about our biology." The council exchanged glances, their faceted eyes narrowing. "Explain," another elder commanded. And so Leora told them everything about Earth, about Nathan, and about the child growing inside her. As she spoke, she could feel the weight of their judgment, their disbelief. The Virethi prided themselves on their knowledge of the universe, and to hear that something so unprecedented had occurred, something that defied all logic and understanding, was not something they could easily accept. "You have compromised our genetic purity," one of the elders said, their voice cold and accusing. "This child is an anomaly, a distraction from the path of intellect, and advancement. It will disrupt the balance of our society. Leora's heart pounded, but she stood tall, her crystalline form glowing with a defiant light. This child is not a distraction. It is a bridge between two worlds, a possibility we never considered. Isn't that what we are supposed to do? Explore the unknown, embrace new discoveries. The council was silent for a long moment, their faceted eyes unreadable. Finally, the head elder spoke. We will consider your words, Leora. But know this, if this child threatens the integrity of our society, we will act accordingly. Leora nodded, her heart heavy. She had expected resistance, but hearing the cold, clinical tone in which they spoke of her child cut deeper than she had imagined. As she left the council chambers, she knew that her fight was only just beginning. Xyla's returned the empathic world of Eros. Xyla's home planet, Eros, was a place of emotions. Every thought, every feeling was shared through the intricate web of empathic connections that bound its people together. The Erosians valued emotional depth above all else, but even in a society where feelings were celebrated, there were limits to what was considered acceptable. As Xyla's ship descended onto the planet, she could feel the collective emotions of her people washing over her like a tidal wave. There was curiosity, excitement at her return, but also a growing undercurrent of apprehension. They had sensed something different about her the moment she entered their emotional sphere, and now they waited to hear what it was. Xyla stepped onto the soft, moss-covered ground of her home planet, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. She had always been the wild one, the girl who pushed boundaries, who reveled in the chaos of emotions. But this was different. She wasn't sure how her people would react to the news that she was carrying a child born of love, not just from an alien species but from a human. The elders of Eros, known as the Heart Circle, greeted her in the central square, their empathic presences wrapping around her like a warm embrace. But beneath the warmth, Xyla could feel the tremors of uncertainty. Xyla, daughter of Eros, the lead empath, said, her voice resonating with 1,000 emotions at once, "You have returned with something heavy on your heart." Xyla nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I have. I come back with more than just memories of a far-off world. I come back with life." The collective gasp of the Heart Circle echoed through the empathic web, and Xyla felt the shock ripple through her people like an emotional earthquake. "A child," one of the elders whispered, "but not an Erosian child, we sense. Something else, something foreign." Xyla took a deep breath, steadying herself. "The child is part of me, but also part of another. A human. From Earth." For a long moment, there was silence. The emotions of her people shifted and swirled around her, a storm of confusion, fear, and unexpectedly curiosity. "You have broken the sacred bond of our people," the elder said, her voice trembling with emotion. "To bring a child into the world that is not wholly Erosian is to invite chaos into the web of our emotions. How can we trust that this child will not disrupt the harmony we have cultivated for centuries?" Xyla's heart ached at their words, but she refused to back down. "This child is a part of me, and I am a part of this world. It will learn our ways, feel our emotions, just as I have. But it will also bring something new, something that could enrich our connection, not weaken it." The elder's eyes softened, and for the first time, Xyla felt a glimmer of hope. "We will not cast you or your child out, Xyla, but we must tread carefully. The empathic web is fragile, and we must ensure that this new life does not unravel it." Xyla nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She knew this was just the beginning, but at least she wasn't facing it alone. Thalra's returned the warrior world of Zorith. Thalra's home planet, Zorith, was a world of harsh landscapes and even harsher people. Strength was the only currency that mattered, and warriors were revered above all else. To show weakness was to invite death, and any deviation from the path of strength was seen as betrayal. As Thalra's ship touched down on the jagged cliffs of her homeworld, she felt a familiar sense of dread settle in her chest. She had always been the strongest, the most disciplined warrior among her people. But now, she was returning not just as a warrior, but as a mother-to-be, and not just any mother, but the mother of a human-alien hybrid. Her people greeted her with a cold, silent respect as she stepped onto the stone platform that overlooked the vast, windswept plains. The Zorithians were not a people of words, they valued action above all else. But Thalra could feel the weight of their judgment in the air. General Duran, the leader of her warrior caste, stepped forward, his sharp eyes scanning her from head to toe. Thalra, daughter of Zorith, you have returned, but you carry more than just the honor of battle with you. Thalra clenched her fists, her heart pounding. I carry a child that is part of me and part human. A murmur rippled through the assembled warriors, their expressions unreadable. General Duran's eyes narrowed, his voice low and dangerous. You have tainted your bloodline with the weakness of another species. Thalra met his gaze, unflinching. This child is not weak. It will be stronger than any Zorithian, because it will carry the strength of both worlds. General Duran's jaw tightened, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, respect perhaps, or curiosity. We will see. If this child is to be born on Zorith, it will face the same trials as any of us. If it survives, it will earn its place among us. If it does not, it will be forgotten. Thalra nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew the risks, knew what awaited her child, but she would not let fear rule her. Her child would survive. She would make sure of it. Nima's home planet, Thalassa, was a world of oceans, its cities submerged beneath the tranquil blue waters. Her people lived in harmony with the sea, their lives guided by the ebb and flow of the tides. They were a peaceful, contemplative species, and Nima had always found comfort in the serenity of her world. But now she was returning with a secret that threatened to shatter that peace. As her ship descended into the underwater city of Clarina, Nima felt a deep sense of unease. Her people were not ones to judge harshly, but they valued the purity of their connection to the sea, to the natural world. How would they react to the news that she was carrying a child that was part human, a child born from a world so far removed from the gentle currents of Thalassa? Her mother, Elira, met her at the entrance to their family's dwelling, her soft violet eyes filled with concern. Nima, you have been gone for so long. I felt your absence like a shadow over the water. Nima swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. I'm sorry, Mother, I've brought something back with me, something that will change everything. Elira's eyes widened, her gaze dropping to Nima's stomach. A child? But how? Nima took a deep breath, her voice trembling. The father is human, from a distant planet called Earth. This child is a part of me, but also a part of him. For a long moment, her mother said nothing. The soft hum of the ocean currents filled the silence between them, and Nima's heart raced. Finally, Elira reached out and placed a gentle hand on Nima's stomach. The sea does not judge, she said softly. It flows, it adapts, it embraces all life within it. This child is a part of you, and as such, it is a part of Thalassa. Tears filled Nima's eyes as she embraced her mother, relief flooding through her. But even as she felt the warmth of acceptance, she knew that not all of her people would be so understanding. The tides were shifting, and she would have to navigate the changing currents carefully. Kyvra's return, the logical world of Metronus. Kyvra's home planet, Metronus, was a world governed by logic and order. Her people were known for their cold, calculated approach to life, their emotions carefully controlled, and their society structured around efficiency and intellect. There was no room for unpredictability, no tolerance for deviation from the logical path. As Kyvra's ship descended onto the smooth, metallic surface of her home city, she felt the familiar calm of her logical mind taking over. But beneath that calm, there was a flicker of something else, something she had never felt before. Fear? Anxiety? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that the child growing inside her was a disruption, an anomaly that her people would not easily accept. She was met by the Council of Thought, the ruling body of Metronus, their faces expressionless as they awaited her explanation. Kyvra, daughter of logic, you have returned with knowledge, one of the council members said, his voice as measured and emotionless as ever. But we sense an irregularity in your presence. Explain. Kyvra stood tall, her voice steady. I have returned with more than knowledge. I have returned with a child that is part of me and part human. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. This is an illogical development, the lead council member said. Our species is not compatible with humans. How is this possible? Kyvra took a deep breath. I don't know, but it has happened. And this child is proof that our understanding of genetic compatibility is flawed. The council was silent for a long moment, their minds processing the information. Finally, the lead council member spoke again. This child is a deviation from the logical path. It cannot be allowed to disrupt the order of our society. Kyvra's heart clenched, but she kept her voice calm. This child is not a disruption, it is an opportunity. An opportunity to expand our understanding, to evolve beyond the limits of our current knowledge. The council was silent again, their decision hanging in the balance. Finally, the lead council member nodded. We will observe. But know this, Kyvra, if this child poses a threat to the logical order, it will be dealt with accordingly. Kyvra nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew the risks, but she also knew that this child, her child, was worth fighting for. As the days passed, each of the alien girls settled back into their respective worlds, but nothing felt the same. Their time on Earth had changed them, and now they were mothers-to-be, carrying children that represented the future of the galaxy, children that would either be the key to a new era of unity and understanding, or the spark that ignited conflict and division. Each of them faced their own challenges, Leora with the cold logic of the Varithi, Xyla with the emotional storm of the Erosians, Thalra with the brutal strength of the Zorithians, Nema with the gentle flow of the Thalassians, and Kyvra with the rigid logic of the Matronis. But through it all, they held on to the hope that their children, these hybrids of two worlds, would find a place in the galaxy. They had left Earth behind, but the connection they had forged there, the love they had found, the children they now carried would shape the future in ways they could not yet imagine.